Got him. And we'll go ahead and let you start presenting, and that way we'll get Marco here.
Wait, to do the flag salute and stuff?
I know. he
I
won't reply to
understand.
this. I know.
Wanted this presentation, so.
Can we do the
We have
flag
a-
salute? No, or is that the
Did
meeting?
you there?
Yes, we do.
We don't do the flag salute on the next.
Yeah,
meeting.
okay.
Oh, where's me?
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Emily Gildner. I'm with the attorney's office. So Tom Grastra is your designated city attorney. And he works in, well, he actually works from Montana now, but he's with our office and I'm one of the partners of Tom's. So I am here to discuss. I helped fill in for Tom while he, when he was not able to
That's
come.
great.
And I've enjoyed the last few days and we're supporting those sides.
Oh. It's being weird, so I don't know.
They should be able to see it.
Can you see it, Lilo?
Yes, yes, I can see it. I see it as the side panel, like the present, not the presentation view.
Show at the top.
By the way, the calendar Zoom link is not working. I had to use what was in the packet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Sure, that works.
So I am here to kind of give an overview of the different lands of government, as it's called under the RCW. I generally say forms of government, but technically they are lands of government. So this is under RCW 35A12 and 35A13. You're currently a mayor-council form plan of government, which is under 35A12. And so we'll be discussing a little bit more on the differences with a council manager form of government.
Sorry, this is my first time. Just click on it. Okay, there we go. Okay.
Did I just press the over button?
Yep, back or forward. You always have to click.
Or do I-
For it to work.
Where did
She
you?
wasn't clicked on it.
Oh, okay.
Just test it out. Got
You
it.
got
Good.
Thank you for bearing with me. So, as I said, the current form of government is a mayor council, so you have an elected mayor. This is called a strong mayor form of government. The mayor is the actual head of the executive branch. Council is a separately elected body and is solely designated for legislative functions. Most cities in Washington state are under a mayor council form of government. It is the most common form of government. We put up here 227 of the 281 cities. There actually used to be 3 forms of government. There was what was called a commission form of government. City of Shelton was the only one that did that, but they have since switched over, I believe, to a council manager form of government recently. So that now there's only these 2 types in the state of Washington. The council manager form of government is actually the most common since 1970 for cities that have been incorporated since then, or for cities that have been transitioned to different forms of government. There are some since 1970 that have transitioned back to a mayor council form of government, but the vast majority of cities incorporating or changing their form of government since 1970 have been moving to a council manager style. So this is a hired professional executive that reports to the council. They are independent in the sense that they run the day-to-day operations separately and apart from the council. But they do report directly to the council, and the majority of the council can terminate the contract, and the majority of the council are the ones responsible for hiring the city manager. As we said, currently 54 of the 281 cities are using a council manager form of government. We represent 2 cities right now that are council manager form of government, and we have represented 2 cities that have gone through a transition. Either one of them went from a mayor council to a council manager, and one of them went from a council manager to a mayor council. So this is kind of an overview of the differences as far as when we're talking about responsibilities. The legislative authority in a mayor council is solely with the council body. The council manager, the mayor is a ceremonial head, essentially. So they are part of the council. The mayor is part of the council. They are elected like any other council member, and they can vote like any other council member. But their title of mayor is largely ceremonial. The executive authority under a mayor council is with the mayor. So they hire and fire the department heads. Most of the time it's with council consent, but they are in charge with making all of those decisions. Under the council manager, it is actually the appointed manager that decides on the department heads and makes all of those staffing decisions and those day-to-day decisions. As I said, the city manager does report to the council, but a majority of the council is required to hire or fire the city manager in accordance with their contract. So we'll abbreviate it for CEO. Mayor is elected by the people and manager is not elected. So the 7 elected officials are who would be responsible for hiring the executive, not the citizens of Leavenworth. Under your current form of government, the only way to remove the CEO, the chief executive, is through a recall election, or if they decided to resign. Those are really the only options for removal of that executive function. In a council manager, a majority of the council can vote to terminate the manager's contract. Again, so for in a mayor council, your terms are very similar. It's a 4-year term, elected, same. Moving to a council manager, the council still has 4-year terms. The manager, though, can outlast those 4-year terms. There is no term limit for a council manager. So that can provide some of that continuity that some cities enjoy, and I'll get into that in a minute. So I think I went over this. The staffing lies with the manager and the council manager form of government, with the mayor and your current form of government. In your current form of government, the mayor does have veto power over council legislative decisions. And then councils can override that with a supermajority, a 4+1 to pass legislation. Council manager form of government, the manager does not have any veto authority. So whatever the council passes on a majority vote or whatever's in align with the state statute is what the policy is going to be. Again, policy development, the executives, same policy as currently. They can recommend to the council, they can propose to the council, staffing decisions lie on the executive side.
Sorry, I just let some people in.
Yeah.
Get that under the
There you go.
bottom.
Yeah, okay, that way. So kind of in a broad overview of some of the issues, responsiveness and accountability. Which plan is going to be more responsive? Professional management. A lot of cities, your city included, do have a professional city administrator that reports to the mayor that handles a lot of those day-to-day operations as well. The appropriate role of politics and administration, city manager takes out some of that political influence potentially, since the executive is not the one that is actually running for any sort of election. Some people would actually disagree with that, though, that they are more subject to political leanings because the entire council is the one that can hire or fire managers. So it's really kind of a perspective based on that. Effectiveness and efficiency, which one is going to be more efficient in implementing council legislative goals and policies. And kind of along with the politics and administration, is there potentially greater harmony or less divisiveness in one form of government or another? Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Are these
No.
rhetorical questions or are you going to dive into?
I'm going to dive into some of the pros and cons. Almost all of these can be argued from both
Either side,
sides.
yeah.
And it's really just, those are the things that are issues for you to kind of think of when you're thinking of your community, because no one knows your community better than you. That's why you are here and to serve it. Some people find that they want a elected official who is from their, they want the executive who's from their community, who knows their issues. Whereas in a council manager form of government, there's no residency requirement for the manager. They are hired, and so they can be from elsewhere, they can live elsewhere, they don't have to live within the city, they don't have to have the same residency requirements that an elected mayor does. So that responsiveness and accountability, are you being accountable to 7 council members versus the entire citizenry? It can go either way. So those are just some of those issues for you to kind of balance in that way. And I'll kind of go through some more of the underlying principles and more of the pros and cons. Okay. So, some of the underlying principles in the mayor council. So it is a true separation of powers. The current strong mayor is what our federal government is based on: a elected legislative, an elected executive, and then a separate judiciary. You don't really have that, but anyway. So you have the true separation of powers. The mayor has the veto power, and you can go back and forth on those kind of policy decisions with the ultimate policy goals with the line with the council. There's political leadership generally. Local government, it's not quite as, well, I guess that could go either way also. As far as when we're talking politics in the federal sense, it's usually not as divisive in that way, but you definitely have your local issues that create that political nature that the mayor is going to respond to differently, probably than a city manager who is not elected. As I said, you have strong central executive. They're the ones that are in charge of hiring and firing for department heads and general staffing issues day to day. Professional administrator is often hired. There's very few cities that have a strong mayor form of government that don't have a professional administrator. I'm not even sure if I can come up with one. East Wenatchee. Okay, there we go. Because it's usually complex, and that professional leadership is needed in addition to the strong central executive. And as I said earlier, the mayor does have veto powers. So a 4-member council can pass a code provision, mayor can decide to veto it, and it would require 5 council members to overturn that. Council manager, as I said, there is some more separation of the politics because the manager is never having to have to run for an elected office. They have to report to elected officials, so obviously there's still going to be some of those politics involved, but it's separate.
Sorry, we're being rude. This is we're just checking in with Marco, who's not here.
Oh, he's on Zoom.
He's,
Oh, he's on Zoom?
Yeah.
He's on Zoom.
Oh, good. I was asking him where he was, and he sent me a picture of the SWAT team up Johnson. He's not
married.
I'm here.
No, okay.
Just making it clear you're not the suspect, Marco.
No, I'm definitely not the suspect. My bow and arrow wouldn't cover that.
Good for you for multitasking.
Okay, well, Marco, since
Sorry,
you're
Emily.
online,
Yeah,
if
it's,
you end up
I know
having
it's-
questions, feel free to pop your hand up and Andrea can interrupt me then. Okay. So under the council manager, there is a thought that it is a bit more efficient and economical because you don't have kind of 2 lead executives that you may have in a strong mayor, since a lot of strong mayors are not full-time, and so you have a full-time administrator dealing with some of those tasks. Again, that's not always the case though, so that's really a judgment call for the city. You still have a fairly strong central executive. As I said, the city manager is still the one responsible for hiring and firing department heads. There may still be some council confirmation requirements as there are in a strong mayor form of government. The manager is not responsive to the council for day-to-day operations and staff management. Council is not responsible for directing the manager in specific areas, but as a general policy direction through your policy implementation. And if unhappy with the kind of general day-to-day management of the city, at that point, the city council can decide to terminate the manager. So there can be, because of the longevity of the city manager, potentially, they don't have to run for election every 4 years. There is some argument that there is more collegiality and communication amongst staff, since you are not subject to the every 4-year political pressure. And it tends to follow more of a business model. Most corporations have a CEO that is appointed by a board, and the CEO is responding to a board. So. Sorry, I still don't know which way I'm going. Some of the cons. These are kind of a little bit of the reverse, so I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but mayor is subject to the political pressures as they have to run for election every 4 years. Some argument is that the mayor may have too much power over the day-to-day administration or direction of policy. Some strong mayors don't have the necessary executive or leadership training, but again, a lot of these are remedied through the city admin position that most strong mayor cities have, just because there isn't the ability in cities who have an elected mayor to have all of the qualifications needed to run a city in general. It's a lot more difficult to remove an elected mayor than it is to remove a hired city manager. Like I said, there's often 2 salaries. Most of the time, if you have a city admin, the mayor's salary is not that significant though. And the mayor is not necessarily accountable to the council. So they can move forward on their own projects a little bit more independently than the council. Again, these are not day-to-day things that the manager would still be able to process over. But on a policy level, the mayor has more discretion to kind of guide their policy direction. Some cons on the council manager side, as I said, the manager may not know the city. There's no requirement that they have to live here either before or after they get hired. They could be from Seattle, come over occasionally. That is entirely within the council's discretion. You also can't make it a requirement of their contract.
Really?
Necessarily, because that infringes a little bit on their travel abilities. So, I mean, you can make that they work here full-time a requirement, be in person, but not that they live within the city limits, as that is going back to the mayor and council form of government. Sometimes citizens get confused about who's actually in charge and what the responsibility of the manager and being able to respond to citizen inquiries. The mayor, so the mayor appointed amongst the council has no independent authority. As I said, they're largely ceremonial at that point. They still chair the meetings of council meetings, but they don't have any independent authority for that.
Emily, can I pause? Did you just say the mayor's appointed by the council?
Yeah, so in the council manager form of government, you still have a mayor.
Yeah,
They are
they're
one of
not
the council
They're
members.
elected by the.
They're just elected as a council member, not as a mayor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. It's, one of you would be the.
It's like,
mayor.
oh, interesting.
So there's actually 2 ways that you can get a mayor and a council manager. And like I said, it's largely ceremonial. They're the ones that chair the meetings. They're the ones, if there's a ceremonial ribbon cutting or something
Yeah.
that they want a representative to attend, those kinds of things. There's 2 ways that you can appoint a mayor and a council manager form of government. You can do it as the council does now with like a mayor pro tem position. Every 2 years you vote for whoever that is. There's also a mechanism through state statute to designate a position, so position 1, position 2, that is elected by the entire city as the mayor. And so then that again would be the ceremonial mayor. So if you wanted to be the ceremonial mayor, you could go through that process, but it is no more authority than any other council member. They do not have the functions of a strong mayor. It's just the ceremonial portion.
So position 1 on the ballot could be for mayor, but they have no additional power than
Still
any of
vote
the.
as a council member.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But
That's
they do
interesting.
get to vote.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you go to the council manager forum, can the council limit the scope of work or expand the scope of work? So let's say you have, and I don't mean this, let's say you have somebody who lives in East Wenatchee that's our manager. Keep that person from getting out of control. Could we set the scope of work and limit his powers? Or is it a free range?
It is set by statute as far as the manager's ability to manage the city. So you can direct policy,
Okay.
but you can't say, you know, that you're only allowed to, you know, focus on projects that are less than X amount of dollars, or, you know, you have to focus on parking during this term of the contract, or you can't.
Policy
limit it.
and budget.
Yeah, policy and budget are what council have control
Yeah.
over. Any of the day-to-day operations and implementation of that policy and budget are still gonna lie with the executive that's been hired,
And hiring and firing and evaluations.
are all with the
Always there.
executive.
Yeah.
So the council will have responsibility for evaluations of the city manager.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I meant.
But that's it. The city manager will have all of the other evaluations. Council cannot direct the city manager to hire or fire any
Yeah.
particular department head. That is solely within the purview of the city manager. If the council doesn't like the department heads, they could get rid of the city manager to find someone else who's going to hire or fire. But you're gonna be terminating a contract, which may come with, you know, various severance options, those kinds of things also. So I mean, that's a whole other discussion. And also, you know, the manager is free to go. I mean, if they get offered a job, or if they see a different city that is offering a higher salary or anything like that, they're professional, they could decide to move on as well, not just council making that decision. They have that ability as well.
And it's the manager that doesn't have to live within the city? That-
Correct.
Okay,
Correct. The manager does not have to live.
But you can make them report 5 days a week.
right.
Yeah, but he can hide from the public.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to what we have right now. It's
We can tell
administrator.
someone
We don't
lives now.
require the Selby to live in the city limits.
No, but we can tell everybody where he lives. Go look at his.
Just see my street sign in my window.
Emily, are there any common threads with the demographic of those 54 Washington cities in terms of size, or is there any commonalities with those municipalities, or are they all different sizes all over the state?
Yeah, I mean, they range, I mean. Currently, the cities that we represent that are city manager are, about your size. City of Granite Falls and City of Carnation,
Council manager?
they're both council manager right now. City of Granite Falls transitioned from a mayor council to a council manager in 2016 or 2017.
Marco's raising his hand.
Okay, I'll finish this. And then, City of Snohomish was a council manager from around 1971 until 2016. They moved back to a mayor council, form of government. So they're about 10,000 now. So they've been less than that most of their council manager term. City of Washougal is a council manager. They transitioned from a mayor council to council manager back roughly the same time frame, 2016. They're about 16,000. So, I mean,
It'd be so interesting to hear from them how it's worked out.
like I said, both City of Granite Falls and City of Snohomish have transitioned opposite directions during my course of representation. And so I have anecdotal, and it's really just a matter of what the city citizens like. The City of Granite Falls was council initiated change of form of government. Snohomish was citizen initiated. They did a petition, put it on the ballot. They did it that way. So what's Marco's question?
He's,
Oh, Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is a little spotty here, so if it breaks up. My question was, in the council manager scenario, can council create policy that regulates the power of the manager in terms of saying, hey, if they want to, hire and fire staff, it actually has to go through council type of thing? And can we create policy that kind of limits the power of the manager in a sense that, you mentioned earlier that there's quite an overarching, power position when the manager's in charge, but can we change that policy so specifically regarding certain amounts of money, certain amounts of executive actions, and certain types of employee management would have to go through council? Is that possible?
So no, not really. Under 35A 13080, these are the city manager powers and duties. So these are set by state statute. So you can't make these any more restrictive. Now, a lot of code cities do have, even for strong mayors, have department heads subject to council confirmation. You can still do that with city manager. That, the city manager appoints the public works director with subject to council confirmation. But as far as any other staffing goes beyond department heads, no, you're gonna have to. So I mean, I could go through 080, but if you look up, like I
Don't
said,
worry about it.
yeah, 35A 13080 enumerates the city manager power and duties. And you can't limit it more than that. It's statutorily prescribed what the city manager's powers would be.
I have another question.
Okay, so the council can, be involved in the hiring. Can they also be involved in the firing?
No,
For the manager?
for the manager, yes, you can hire and fire the
Yeah.
manager, but for
Not
department
staff,
heads,
no.
no.
So
Okay, but
there's
the
a-
staff have to be subject to confirmation. Department.
Appointment can be subject to council confirmation.
Okay,
But
that's
they're-
great. Okay,
they're
so yeah,
only
you've
the
answered.
manager.
Okay, that answered my question. Thank you.
So if you have a staff member that has an issue with the manager, where does that staff member go to have that resolved?
Good question.
Human resources.
HR.
In
If you
a
have,
nonprofit world, you can
Yeah.
usurp the executive director and go to the board, but there's a process for it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, it's really through the HR process. I mean, obviously, even now, people are allowed to reach out to their elected officials regarding anything. If there comes a point in time where council is concerned about the overall management of the city, that's when council can decide to terminate the city manager and hire a new one.
and out of the cities that you represent, has anybody terminated their manager?
Not during, only when they moved to the council, the mayor council form of government. The city manager was terminated and they hired a new city administrator under the mayor. Oh, no, that was a city admin. So no,
No.
city managers, not been involved with the city manager termination. But it's not a whole lot. Well, except for the council directing it. So we had to go through that process when the city of Snohomish transitioned to the mayor council. They did not keep on the city manager as the city admin in that case.
So back to my other question. So if HR gets a hold of a complaint, something's going on, where does that go from there?
Through the
Does it come back to
policies
us?
that you
Executive
established.
session, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what I guess the complaint is. I mean, if it rises to the level of needing, no. If it's egregious, then our office is gonna get involved and we're gonna have an executive session, regarding potential city and that kind of thing. If it's just general, I don't like how they're managing. That's kind of.
I'm talking way beyond. Let's say toxic. 'Cause
Yeah,
I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, you're probably gonna get wind of that anyway, just because this is a small town. It's gonna go through a human resource process. And if it needs to come to council to evaluate the council manager, because you do have annual evaluations that the council is gonna do. So
That's what I was gonna ask.
that would likely be the process for a lot of that is ferreted out. Go through, make sure. Okay, process. So if you decide you want to move to a council manager, as I said, there's two different ways. Council can initiate it by resolution, or it can be a petition of the citizens, and we've been involved with both aspects in reverse order. Citizens can at any time, and it's 10% of the population that voted in the last municipal election is required for the petition method. Then the council is required to pass a resolution to put it on the ballot. If the council wants to initiate it, then you just do the resolution to put it on the ballot. And then there are different timeframes for that election. And then it'll get voted on through the petition method. So as I said, both of them are required to go to a vote. It's a majority of the citizen vote to pass. So a simple majority, not a 60% majority. Then you're also required to appoint pro-con committees. So there are various timeframes. Usually we recommend about 6 months to get through all of the processes to meet the auditor deadlines for getting it on the ballot, for appointing your pro-con committees, for getting the explanatory statements in. All the deadlines tend to be the same time frame, but for council to appoint pro-con committees, we usually like to back it up a few months so that you have time to advertise that those are going on. But we also are gonna have to, you have to be mindful of any of the public funds for an election. Council can't spend significant time or money advocating for one position or another. If you want to put it on the ballot, that's essentially your position. You can pass one resolution that, as long as it's unanimous, that says we support the change in form of government or we oppose the change in form of government. That's all the political positioning that the council can take. So the effective date is a little vague. So the mayor generally finishes out their term and you have to go through the process of hiring. And so a lot of times it lines up with when a mayor is going to be going out anyway. And then establishing going the other way, you have to wait until you get to an election. So you have to vote to change the form of government, and then you have to wait for another election to elect a mayor. And then that changes the form of government. We do have some guidance from when Granite Falls went from a mayor council to a council manager on the process, and it was not that long because that same election, the mayor was leaving also. So then there was no mayor for 2 months while they were still under a mayor council form of government. Then you have to appoint a mayor. So there's a lot of detailed processing in that change in form of government. And then as I stated earlier, the decision on an elected mayor, chair, or if it's going to be council appointed. And then finally, you have to update your entire code. So anything where it says that the mayor shall, whatever, you have to decide whether or not that is within the manager's purview or it comes to council. Some of those aren't negotiable. Because we would have to go through and align it with the state statute, but some of those are things that council can decide whether or not they take control over. I think that was kind of a question earlier. And so you've been asking questions as we've gone along, and I think I've gone.
I have a quick question. You mentioned City of Carnation. They only have 5 council members.
Yes, so, the population threshold, is 2,500, which I know you're under, but you already have 7 council members, so you can keep 7 council members. Unless you want to go down to 5 council members, and then there's a process in which you can eliminate 2 council positions. But as a 7 council member, city already, you can maintain the 7 council member seats, even though you're under the 2,500 population threshold.
So with the mayor or the council manager, it's 7 seats only, and one of those becomes the ceremonial mayor.
Yep,
So instead of 8, like we have now, we would have 7.
yep.
Anybody want to give up a council seat?
Maybe.
Might answer the question.
Talk to you after the meeting.
I think this is fascinating. I'm glad, I think Marco brought this up, but I think it's healthy to talk about. Systems should be challenged. We should look at new ways of doing things. Whether or not, they're working or not, but just like thinking outside the status quo. I like the idea of a consistent manager, like that, having that consistency is huge. I couldn't imagine working at a city, especially being a department head and having a new boss every 4 years. I think that can really create some turbulence. Unnecessary turbulence. So not even thinking about the mayor position as much as just managing the staff and the morale and initiatives, and you lose that institutional memory when the person leaves. So I think that alone gives it some serious merit.
My thought.
Not sure. I mean, I want to hear from some people.
I did not bring this up.
I know you didn't, but I mean, this is basically about you and the mayor. I mean, it's kind of like the spotlight's on you guys.
Put them in the hot seat.
Yeah. I'm just, what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
Where I come from, it's more common to have a select board manager form of government.
Okay.
Cities have to be a minimum of 9,000 in the state of Massachusetts. Otherwise, you have to be a town.
Sure.
So it's a select board manager. That's the form of government that I'm used to.
Okay.
So it's very much like the council manager form. You've got a chair of the board who does have a vote. They generally switch over every year. So they'll have a new chair every year. Rotate them. So that's closer to the form of government that I'm used to operating within. I will say on the flip side, having been a department head who struggled with my boss as a manager and feeling like I had no one to go to, that was frustrating. That
Yeah,
was
my question.
yeah.
So, I mean, I see both sides. The issue that I would say is, I like it when the manager lives here.
Right.
So
When
the
what?
public, the manager lives here, whether it's an administrator or a manager or a mayor, whoever, we're all required to live here.
Yeah.
That department head, if they are the head, I don't want them hiding down the valley 25 miles when there's when somebody goes, where is he? So, well, I'm sorry, he was here 5 minutes ago and went home. Not that they should bug you at home, but I know you answer your phone. So that's the upside of having somebody live in town. So if that will be a requirement from the council, I mean, I can see doing this to a point, but
In Mass, there are some communities that do have a residency requirement for their manager. Others don't.
right.
A lot of them are going away from it because they find that people don't want to move 30 minutes away, uproot, sell a house, buy a house,
Right.
get their kids into a different school system.
Yeah.
They don't want to uproot their lives just for a new career opportunity.
Right. And I understand real estate price has an issue there too, but
Real estate's a struggle here.
yeah.
As an outsider, it's a struggle here.
I'm saying it's a requirement. I'm just saying I prefer. So anyways,
Well, in 40 words or less, Marco, why 40 words or less, you can, not 40. Why are you doing this?
That's a great question, Sugar. Thanks for asking. Realistically, I had some dealings with Sherry and Joel previously when I was like working on the ice rink and other things before I was even involved. And I felt like there was this polarization between where Sherry and Joel were a team and they were always competing with city council. And I feel like that a lot of weird stuff happened between them in terms of like the Metal Arc and other stuff. And I saw them like kind of like, you know, this little bit of a competition between council and then the administrator and the mayor teaming up. And then on the flip side of that, when I came to be council 2 Januaries ago, we had no city administrator, and I kept kind of like trying to get answers and trying to work with this. And Ann and Jason were like, "Oh, don't worry about it. This will all get better once we get a city council, once we get a city administrator." And I realized we had been like a full year without a city administrator, and I thought, well, why is this happening? And that was obviously really confusing to me. And then once we got a city administrator, you know, stage left, enter Selby, things got way better. And I'm like, well, how is it possible we were a year without a city administrator? So to me, that was part of the question. And then getting back to what Jason just said, you know, you have different personalities come in as mayor, and suddenly you're riding a roller coaster where they can just come in and hire and fire as they please and change the entire character of the city, and we lose continuity. So that's my 40 words, Sharon.
Thank you.
I'd like to keep studying this. I think it would be helpful, Emily, you know, if we were going to ultimately consider potentially making a change like this, I'd like to kind of know and understand what the timeline looks like so that we can kind of stay on point if that's a direction we end up going. But I'd like to keep studying this. I'd like to learn more about other municipalities that have transitioned from mayor council to council manager. You know, how often that has happened in the last decade or so in Washington state, potentially what was the motivation for that change? If it's possible to know that, and what has changed for those municipalities by changing that form of government. And they obviously haven't changed it back since that has happened. But there's obviously, as you described, some pros and cons, and I feel like we just need a little bit more information and would need to study this more before we can make a definitive answer on whether or not to pursue it.
Well, MRSC does have a great article on the plan of government. 18 cities have changed since 1972 to a council manager form of government. 2 of those have reverted back to a mayor council. In the last 10 years, it looks like 4 have changed: Union Gap, Grand Falls, Shelton, Washougal. But I can certainly put together a timeline. The ballot measure is really kind of, it depends on what you can do a special election. Generally, we recommend November as that's going to be the cheapest, since already so many ballots going out. So I can put together a timeline assuming that it would go on a November ballot measure, and then what the time frame would be for Chelan County auditor, for the city council to get all of their ducks in a row for the November ballot, and then kind of a brief overview if you did it this year versus next year as far as when the implementation will actually occur. So I can put that together.
Yeah, that would be helpful. We've got a lot of seats up for election this year, so that can make it pretty complicated as well.
That was my question, because we have 5 of the 7 seats that have to go. Normally it would be 4, but 1 was appointed, so it'll be 5 plus the mayor's seat. So if you have all these seats on the current election for the current form of government, but then you also have this ballot measure to change the form of government. If the ballot measure to change the form of government supersede, and then, so let's say the mayor ran for mayor, sorry, you're not gonna be a mayor anyways. Is that how that works?
Sure.
Yeah, once it gets implemented. So again, we have to kind of go through some of the more specifics as far as the mayor's term, but yeah, as long as at that point, then the mayor, the ceremonial mayor, would be appointed by the city council once we actually implement the change in form of government. The longest portion usually has to do with updating your code and getting all of that together. So I mean, usually we take a few months to do a code audit, switch everything over. So there are some of those details, but yeah, I mean, just because a lot of council members may be up for election this year, because it's going to a council manager form of government. It's really just the mayor's position then that would be eliminated, at which time the actual form of government is effective.
I don't like the idea that the city manager doesn't have to live, doesn't have to live here. And it sounds like they just can scatter around as they so choose. And that doesn't feel solid to me.
I would say we need to bring this to a close because we're 15 minutes into the bed and
I will
breakfast.
like to correct what I said earlier. You can make residency a requirement under the.
Council manager,
Yes,
okay.
but as Selby pointed out, that does tend to limit your pool if you're going for a hired executive.
Well, we had a city manager, didn't we? Wasn't
We've
Anna
never,
a city, come as a city manager?
no, she
No.
came as a city administrator. We've had a,
Oh, okay. I
Mayor.
thought she was a city manager.
no.
Okay.
No, it's council manager is the time where you get the manager, but I mean, I think it's something that really, if you're thinking of going that direction, really to talk to some of those cities that are about the same size and about that same and how it's going and, cause it's, I mean, that's how you're gonna get more tangible,
Right.
cause you can put all these things, comparisons up. But,
Scratching the
you need
surface.
that, you need to see the function on the ground, so to speak, and.
Sure, it's gone well in
involved
some
it.
cases and terribly in others,
Right.
depending on the hiring of the manager,
It's gonna depend on, it's like anything, right? Depend on who's involved, but.
And the manager sounds like they can scoot whenever they want to.
Well,
And that's,
yeah.
So consulting,
Spoken an administrator, right?
but he is Selby under contract?
Yeah, a manager would be as well.
So, yeah, that
No, okay.
position wouldn't be that
Between
different,
manager and
but-
city administrator really wouldn't be that
Okay.
right,
different. We
The
just wouldn't
position
have
is
a executive mayor.
right.
Pardon me?
There may be, the position is out though, so I mean, there may be notice requirements.
Mhm.
As far as how much time the city administrator or city manager has to give you a heads up that they're leaving. But they aren't tied to the election term, the 4 years, like, I mean, the mayor can obviously resign too, but you can't force them.
And
I think that the only hesitancy would be if you think of it as a way that the council gets more directly involved in the day-to-day, that's not the reason to do it, because that's not the situation. You would still need to, I mean, it would still be only the majority that directs, not individuals getting
It doesn't
involved.
change.
Right, it doesn't change that reality at all.
We're still just
Right.
legislative.
Yep.
It just changes who's our executive.
That's kind of the
Exactly.
nugget.
Who picks that?
That's the question though, right there, because Selby now reports to the mayor. If Selby reported to the council, that does give us a little bit more of a direct line on setting policy if 5 of us are in agreement. So if we felt like, something was more important than the mayor can filter the council's priorities essentially. I'm not picking out you, Carl, just talking about how it works.
Right,
So we would have a more of a direct line to the policy directions.
On the flip side, and one of the reasons that Snohomish changed from the council manager to the mayor council is that the citizens then don't necessarily have that same direct influence. They don't have, with a strong mayor, they can go directly to a mayor and say, these are the policy issues. But that's also part of the political nature of that. You have to get at least 4 council members on board to change the direction of the manager. So.
okay, I think we should move on, and keep exploring and be talking to folks about it.
I'll do a timeline for you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. That was really good.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Emily. That was super helpful.
All right, next item is discussing the moratorium on bed and breakfast. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. I was kind of hoping somebody else would take this one. So this isn't my favorite topic because moratoriums are difficult to implement and they have regulatory requirements for meetings and follow-up and notices. And as you can see in the write-up that I provided, you know, the ADU question and how ADUs are being used for bed and breakfast or not is something that, and the density of bed and breakfast is something the Planning Commission has on their docket. And I do have it on the next agenda for April. Time allowing, the Planning Commission will be talking about this in just a couple of weeks or a week. So, you know, the staff recommendation as noted in the write-up is not to do a moratorium, but I know several council members have been requesting this because of the concern about how many B&Bs may be in a neighborhood. For that reason, I did pull some of the whereas statements from the original adoption. You know, they did acknowledge that B&Bs can create a change to a neighborhood. They talked about how short-term rentals in residential zones can have negative impact and how they were trying to mitigate those through the regulations of the bed and breakfast. They also acknowledged in their whereas statements that this was done too as a way of addressing the high cost of housing and allowing people who live in Leavenworth to continue to live in Leavenworth and have income on their property as values increase, as cost of living was increasing, you know, years ago and has skyrocketed since. Knock on wood, we don't want it to keep doing that. Anyway, and they noted, you know, that the income can provide property owners the opportunity to stay in Leavenworth and participate. We have had some people move into town, you know, I'm thinking of one younger type member who works remotely and he is using his dwelling that he purchased for a bed and breakfast, and that is helping offset his ability to have bought the home to begin with. We also included in the write-up the most updated list of B&Bs in the city limits, which ones are ADUs and which ones are not. We have a couple that are no longer operating and those are listed there as well. And we have a new one that just applied, which is Councilmember Lundgren's, which we'll be going to hearing next month. So all of that disclosed, that is my opening statement, and I'll just turn it over to you guys for discussion, and whatever direction you give us, we will move forward with. So with that, Mayor, council members.
Mayor, I prepared a brief statement and good segue, Lilith. Excuse me for my throat. Dear fellow council members and members of the public, as you know, my wife and I are building an ADU and have applied for a conditional use permit so that we can host a B&B. We've kicked around this idea for about 8 years and hired an architect in 2020. At that time, and still to this day, building an ADU and creating a B&B is allowed by the city. There are benefits that go along with having a B&B beyond monetary. It's become apparent that at least 3 community members and maybe some of my council members feel that it's inappropriate for me as a council member to host a B&B, and I'd like to address this topic briefly. First and foremost, to avoid any perceived or real conflicts of interest, I'll recuse myself from voting on anything related to B&Bs. I have and I will continue to support the Planning Commission, the Housing Committee, and the city's effort to increase affordable housing. And I voted in favor of every recommended policy and expenditure that supports this priority. I have other things that I'd like to say, but I don't want to influence the discussion or the direction that we go. So if anybody's curious about my views on this, I'll gladly respond when I'm asked. And thank you for listening.
Thanks, Jason.
All right, others?
Lilith, I have a couple questions for you. Of course. Is she on?
Yeah.
So the ones that are on Front Street and Commercial Street that already exist, are those zoned in that commercial zone or that without the conditional use permit anyways?
No, not all those properties are in commercial zoning.
Okay, so the one at
These,
1213 Front
these
Street,
are bed and breakfasts that,
I understand that, but I'm saying like there's one
Sorry,
at
go ahead.
1213 Front Street. So is that, it's Front Street is commercially zoned all the way to Highway 2, isn't it?
Well, that one's really old.
yeah, that's an
87.
old one.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they've done the conversion to a short-term rental, but they have a historic bed and breakfast. And no, I hadn't looked at their specific zoning. I know we have several on this list that are in multifamily.
Right.
The Front Street one's in commercial zone.
Yeah, the Front Street ones in the commercial zone, the commercial street ones.
Those ones are in
Are
multifamily.
multifamily,
And
Yeah.
yeah. So no, I haven't dug into that 87 one.
Other questions? Thoughts?
Well, I've been at this for several years trying to get, excuse me, a density study. And because it's grown and grown, the more, it seems like we can't get a density study. It's always hanging somewhere else and everything else goes ahead of it, even now. And so that's why I was pushing for a moratorium, so it would stop and the density study would happen. When we met with the planning commission, they seemed to feel like the B&B was definitely low-hanging fruit and wouldn't take but a couple of meetings to get that done. And so I feel it's being shoved again. And it's not depressing. It's, what would it be? Just feels like it's no use
so,
for me to continue to fight for it, but I'm going to. But I don't feel like I'm banging my head against the
I'll
wall.
tell you your density
This,
right here.
this list of 18 active ones, well, I mean, it's not even that. There's
Actually, it's 19.
15 approved, and there are 3 that are under preliminary approval that aren't operating yet. So right now your density is there's 15 operating.
Yeah, but back when I started this with an 8 page, there were like 6. And he said, well, we'll never get very many. And I think we have very many.
Right. I don't even understand the objection to bed and breakfast. They're very European. They're all over Germany if you've ever been there. When I've gone to visit relatives, they're always like, oh, there's a B&B right down the street. Why don't you just jump right in and go, hang out? And I really feel like they contribute to our community. However, I do agree with limiting the density. I also investigated this beyond what, and I really appreciate Jason's insight on this. I don't think there's any problem with Jason doing a B&B. I don't think there's a conflict of interest. And I really don't understand the public outcry from it. It doesn't really make any sense. It almost seems like a personal matter. However, I would like to see potentially small communities of B&Bs or short-term rentals, spread out somewhere so that they're not, have a limit to the distribution in terms of, I wouldn't want a whole neighborhood to be all B&Bs, but, limit the amount of B&Bs per, in a density fashion, saying, maybe 2 or 3 per square area, or limit the number per block per street, but also take the potential to say, hey, let's build a cul-de-sac that's all B&Bs and allow that to serve our community and our businesses, because I really feel like it really helps our visitor population. It helps, ease the burden on hotels. I mean, there's a lot of people who would much rather be in a B&B because they want to be part of our community. They don't want to just be in a, in a commercially, made hotel. That's great for some people. But when I've toured around the world, staying in B&Bs helps me understand the culture and the people that I'm staying with, helps me feel like I'm part of the community. And I don't feel like it's really, in my opinion, I think it's really like a detriment to that residential area. In other words, if it's properly managed, and we hear about the bad ones, but I think that's a small percentage of the ones that are like these crazy parties that happen all night. Obviously, if somebody is living there, that's not going to happen. So I'm in favor of B&Bs and having a density distribution, but certainly not limit it tremendously, and certainly not a moratorium. That to me is a little absurd.
I would say in response to that, Marco, why I think people are speaking up, and I'm one of them, is that the focus of the housing action plan was basically workforce housing, provide that. Okay, that's been a big push. We've changed code for that, tried to get diversified housing for that. It wasn't, and so that's why the ADUs partly came into life. And what's happened with that is that we are losing housing stock. If people were taking their ADUs and building 30 long-term rentals and doing it that way, I wouldn't have such an issue with it. But that's not what's happening. They're being turned into bed and breakfast for the very good reason that lots more income. Okay, so your long-term rentals or whatever affordable housing you might manage is being replaced by market demand of bed and breakfast. And I think that's the issue that I find this out there is, and we're picking up speed with these bed and breakfasts. There's not a certain, I've got 4 in my neighborhood. When Jason goes in, I'll have 4 in my neighborhood. Okay. It hasn't been an issue with, they're well managed. Management is not an issue. It's, because you have an owner occupied residence. What I'm thinking is if our intent was to provide some way to promote affordable housing through the ADUs possibly, and diversified housing, having them be changed into bed and breakfast is undermining that process. And so I think that's where my concern is. That's why I would support a moratorium.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Zeke. I appreciate that perspective.
So
I'm not trying to get rid of ADUs or get rid of B&Bs, just
limit.
have some kind of a limit. And if you have an ADU, you don't have to turn it into an affordable thing where you get men and all the people involved. You just make your rent for the person to live there an affordable rent, and it doesn't have to be, considered an affordable anything. It's just an ADU that you've chosen to have somebody pay $100 a month for instead of $2,000 a month for.
That usually doesn't pencil.
Huh?
That usually doesn't
No, it
pencil.
doesn't pencil.
That would be a reality.
Well, I'm not saying
Yeah,
you'd make more doing it that way, but you'd still have extra income coming in. And I don't know,
So out of these 18 that are on this right now, half of them are ADUs, half of them are not.
Yeah, only 7 ADUs out of 62 are used as B&Bs in Lillis right up.
So, if the code allows it, and I can see where you can come back and later and say, well, we're going to allow X amount. But right now the code allows it, just what Jason's doing, the code allows it. And he's allowed to build that, and he's allowed to try and charge what he feels beneficial to him. And we as a board or a body here can't force him to put in affordable housing. That's a
No, you
violation.
can't.
And so it's a wish and it's a want for some people, but we can't force him to do that. He's allowed to do that. And so, and I can see where you guys live on Askew, where so there's your density study right there. It's right here in front of you. You want a density, it's right here. It'll show you where they're at, what street, how far apart. But
well, I thought that we changed a lot of codes and blah, blah, blah in order for people to build ADUs more ADUs and to make them affordable. It doesn't mean you're involved with men, but just that, make them affordable. And instead,
According to the construction cost, it went, I'm not gonna build an ADU and rent it for less than it cost me to put it up there.
Right,
And
Yeah.
you shouldn't have, nobody's gonna do that.
no,
The allowance for, the code change that where we made ADUs an opportunity for every residential lot had nothing to do with the actual definition of affordable housing. It was creating an opportunity for additional housing stock. There was never a requirement that they had to be rented at an affordable housing type level.
Right.
It was just for additional housing stock because we need to house our residents.
Right.
And so the affordable housing component of this has never been a part of that conversation.
it's just the housing.
Been
piece.
increased
Just the
supply,
long-term
increased supply
workforce
of residents.
housing that-
It's just to create more units.
And the other,
Yeah.
and if it would, the extent that it's gonna be more affordable is you don't have to buy a new lot and a new, I mean, it is quote, just gonna be more affordable to build it because you've got a lot of that infrastructure there and the lot there and whatever. So you've taken some of that. So, but it's not affordable in the classic sense, but it's going to be added housing stock, and which is one of the things of, again, of trying to create more options for,
Right.
and that's why we're gonna look at triplexes and others that can
And you
fit
know
in.
what, if he decides to leave town someday, maybe the next owner will say, you know what, I don't wanna mess with an overnight rental, I'll rent it at X amount of month to be done.
Yeah.
But the housing stock stays, the use is what he chose to do, which is
Right.
allowed by code versus what somebody wants him to do with it. And that's my issue.
Right.
My issue is I can't impose what I like or dislike on my will on somebody because I just don't like it.
And the question really that we've more got to answer, because as well as the saying that the planning commission is going to take it up, and I know you're frustrated that it's taken so long and whatever, but it is on their agenda. So they are going to look at those density things and how much of it and whatever. The question really before us is moratorium or not, because that's going to be happening. The question is there an appetite to say, no, we've just got to stop it all until that happens, or just keep it as is and let the process go? That's really the two questions.
And the idea is the idea of the ADUs was to increase the housing units. And what it has happened is it's increased to some extent, but when you go to a bed and breakfast, and who can blame people for going to a bed and breakfast if you can make that kind of money?
yeah,
So in a way, you are still losing housing units because it's a tourist industry and you got tourists coming in.
Right.
Of course, they're going to come in. And I would doubt very much anybody would switch Tibor from.
I'm not saying they're going to,
Yeah,
but they
I
have
mean,
that option.
Sure, they have the option,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
what I've seen happen is that the two in my neighborhood, the two that started out as 30-day rentals have both switched over to bed and breakfast.
Mhm.
Okay. And the one on that one, the one that's coming online, I think it's O'Neill's, that was a triplex that had four long-term rentals in there. Now it's changed totally over. It's gonna go to a bed and breakfast with a housing component. So it's, yeah, you're right. You can't make them do this. I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
our goal was increase the housing stock, and hasn't worked.
No.
This is, yeah.
But
I think
you can work with the market dynamic.
The market,
I think-
it's market driven.
Sorry, go ahead, Ann.
I think that our change in code has increased the units. It has been productive. We may not be seeing as many units, ADUs being built as we would like to see, but in Lilith's write-up, it says that we've got 62 ADUs in the city limits, and only seven of them are B&Bs. And granted, it would be nice to have those additional 7 units as long-term rental options. But if they weren't B&Bs, they may not be long-term rental options either, because some people build ADUs just to house their parents when they come and visit, and those aren't going to be rental options either. So some of the points that Tibor is making, where we can't force people to develop a certain way is a very good point, because
True.
saying that all of these B and Bs would be rental units is also not true.
Right.
No.
Yeah,
And
well, we can
I know
work within
people
the
who have
market
ADUs and they
dynamic.
don't run them out at all. They just have friends come and stay, or they have their parents come and stay with them, and they're not rental units at all. So we have an ADU that's not being used long-term. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're keeping the big picture in view, that there are a lot of different options for these types of residential structures.
I have neighbors across the street. They moved in 5.5 years ago. They both moved, they're both nurses. They moved from Seattle. And I met them, I said, you know, you're gonna have company every weekend. And they said, no. I said, yeah. 2.5 years into it, they says, when does this end? I said, when you say stop coming, because people want to come here.
Absolutely.
Now, they're not running a bed and breakfast. They're not running any, do you? Same amount of traffic, same amount of cars going down the road. It's constant, but it doesn't bother me because people are coming to town and those people will walk into downtown, spend money, enjoy the village, tell their friends. So there's an upside to all of it. There are some downsides to some stuff, but we also have to trust that when the city gives us, you know, a conditional use permit, that that person that's getting that is going to take care of it. I mean,
Well, it's the same
Yeah.
with primary residences. There's several primary residences in my neighborhood, and the owner lives there maybe 2 months out of the
Yeah.
year, and they don't rent it out long-term.
no, or they got.
But they have friends that come and stay, or they have family that come and stay, and they're spending money here in town when they're coming, but that's another unit that's not being rented. And
There's a lot of those. There's a lot of second homes, so.
I just want a density study is all.
It's right here.
That's it. Build what you want. I want a
That's what you get
density
right here.
study.
I'm
Well, the
serious.
way to work with the
That's
way to
exactly
work
what
with the
they're
market
doing.
dynamic in this is simply to build small homes on small lots, because the cost per square foot doesn't really change. If you can let people build tiny homes and it's an individual home, you can't rent it out as a short-term rental. It's not a managed bed and breakfast. It's an owned home, and it's tiny, like 1,000 square foot. And that's actually worked in a lot of communities, especially tourist communities, where you create a small area where people can have tiny lots with tiny homes, and the cost per square foot is the same as the market. However, it becomes affordable because it's simply small.
so just so that we can kind of stay on track here, since we've been kind of
Right.
bleeding into different agenda items, I personally would not support a moratorium. I don't think that we have the data to support an emergency situation under state law. But I do know that this specific topic is near the top of the list of priorities on the docket for the Planning Commission. And they've already told us that that will be happening this spring, and I would like to trust that process.
I'd support that.
So it looks like that's the direction we're gonna go, but I read the tea leaves. I don't see a majority here that wants to put a moratorium, and we'll just let the process go, and hopefully you'll get your.
So let it drag on.
Let it drag on. All right. And you will get your study there.
I would like to say that the council has always been in favor of somehow increasing the housing stock. Okay?
Mhm.
So we need to think, okay, we're not in favor of a moratorium. Okay, you can't force people to make those choices. We need to come up with some strategies, other strategies that help us, because we're losing ground.
Yeah.
Well, and that's on our docket for the Planning Commission this year as well. And I think Lilith was just about to talk about that. But that's on our docket for this year as well. For incentivizing
Right.
that and basically requiring that type of development in new developments.
Oh, you mean like the inclusionary process?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's on our docket.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got to do some things besides, to turn that around, so. Okay. We don't do that.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lilith.
We got one more item here, monthly surveys, and that's Marco.
See you, John.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, who's talking about the monthly survey?
You wanted to talk monthly survey. That's on
Yeah,
there.
I've been Thank you. Yeah. So quickly, I just feel like one of the most striking things that I've seen since I've come on council was, we all interact with the community on a regular basis in our own little spheres of influence, which is great. However, I don't see us having a broad sense of what the community wants. And every time we hire a consultant, since I've been on council, I think we spent, maybe $500,000 on studies and consulting this. And what do? They do surveys. So I would like to propose a monthly survey, takes 5 minutes, people get it on their phone, and it will take a while to take hold, and it needs to be marketed well, with our top 10 issues in Leavenworth that, not things like the sewage treatment plant that people really don't know about and actually probably don't care too much, but things that affect the community more, and maybe the downtown corridor, like the study, and just create a compass where our community gets up and publish the results so they know they're being listened to. Let them know we're listening to them. Every month, 10 questions, top 10 issues of Leavenworth. It's on your phone. You just simply, fill out your multiple choice, not big, hard written answers, something that will produce bar graphs and pie charts, and give us some kind of indication whether we're way off base or we're still in the ballpark with our community. And I feel like this is a pretty easy thing to do. We don't have to hire anybody. It's like a Survey Monkey thing. I've made Survey Monkeys. It takes me like half an hour to an hour. And it would allow us to really, we all have our opinions, but it would also allow us to say, hey, what does the public think about a moratorium on bed and breakfast? And we might, once this thing takes hold, we would potentially have, 500 respondents. I'm willing to bet that. And that's a pretty good statistical relevance in terms of our 1,600 voters. So that's something I've been asking to happen for almost a year now, which is why I brought it up to the here in the study session, because it would answer a lot of questions that we have that would just continuously fill the gaps of knowledge that we kind of question. Well, where's the public think of this? So yeah, that's my proposal. I feel like if we could get this done and assign it to one of our staff to start it and advertise it and market it and get it out there and start looking to see, how many respondents are we getting? Is it growing? Is it not growing? Do people even care? It'd be worth a try at this time. And I feel like we have so many issues that do affect the public and the businesses who, get their emails, and they all have one shot at this 10 questions every month. So that's my proposal.
Marco, who would draw up the questions? Council?
That's a great question, Zeke. I think we would all kind of maybe vote on it every week or every month, come up with saying, here's the questions we'd like to bring forth, the top 10. And I think we could all kind of weigh in on that. And then every month it gets published. We look at it and we decide, hey, did this work? Didn't it work? Did the public like it? And let them have feedback. Hey, are you liking this survey? Is it working for you? What questions, what topics are you interested in? That kind of.
What would you say on the phone?
I don't believe it's going to be,
I guess I'm wondering how you're going to get these phone numbers. I mean, I think there's,
no,
I don't know,
but
email. Maybe, but I'm wondering just how this whole technological thing works is with phone numbers. I guess my question.
I mean, I'll just my bias. I don't think you'll get any more good information than you do talking to people and hearing from people. And I don't trust a survey that just goes out, because you don't know who. I mean, you get the same folks or you get different. I mean, there are just so many. I mean, we're elected to represent, and it's called representative government. It's not government by every single thing gets voted on.
Committee.
Government by a committee. And I just think you got to do the work and listen to the people. And you know what? And if you're off track, you'll get voted out. So
That's what those doors are for.
yeah,
Well, I think Marco's
that's 4 years. Al. So in case,
I understand why
Yeah.
he wants it, but
well,
I
in
don't.
case, I've spoken to, I would say 20 people. I've spoken to 20 people who I know personally here in town, and they had no idea what was going on with the aquatic center. And I said, well, why didn't you come to community engagement? They said, my kids, my work, my life, I had other things to do. So I had to show them a picture of what was going on there. So, in addition to community engagement, I feel like we're not reaching them. I talk to a lot of people and people are clueless. They're like, I don't have time to come to your meetings. I don't have time to read your stuff. I don't have time to come in there. I kind of want to be served. And I actually don't always have time to get cornered at Safeway and explain what's going on in the city to people. So it'd be really nice for them to have some kind of input, top 10. And I actually do care what people think. And if they're not being properly represented, I think 4 years is a long time to wait for them to change their representative.
I have mixed feelings about this topic. I very much in general support providing access for people's voices to be heard. And I think that that has the potential to be accomplished through a survey. I think a monthly survey is a little aggressive. I would probably support something that's a little bit more spread out. I also have concerns about our staff capacity for being able to put this together. It takes a lot longer than 30 minutes to put a well-designed survey together that doesn't have leading questions, and surveys are only worth the words that are in them. So I would have some concerns about how that's going to be facilitated. But I like the idea of providing more access to have your voice heard. So I think that this needs to be well thought out in order for it to be potentially implemented in any sort of way.
And you look at how many surveys we've done in the past year, and that's been on a number, these big issues that come up, we put the postcard out, we got a survey, the link to it. And, so there have been a lot of surveys being done. It's just that we don't
But there
do
are,
it but we don't just do it just to say we're doing survey.
right,
It's around specific questions and specific things that come up.
right. And oftentimes they're put together by professionals in that field.
Right.
So I would want to make sure that, like I said, we're not developing surveys with leading questions that are basically creating the answers we're looking for rather than generating really good data for decision making.
Well,
And
I
I
get
think
to
those
agree
leading
with you all the
questions
time.
can be resolved.
Marco,
Go ahead,
I
sorry.
agree with this. I agree with the survey being a useful tool too. I think people will get fatigued every month
Yeah.
and you might get the same 55 people responding every time. And then that is a disproportionate representation of the public. So I would be open to doing a survey quarterly or a couple times a year
As needed.
as a compass kind of thing, so that we can collect information. And I have seen so many poor surveys.
Yeah.
And then what do you get from a poor survey that doesn't give you the choice that you want to give? You either don't do it or it just skews everything. So I don't think it's as easy as a yes or no
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so I fully back the survey thing. I would say 2 to 4 times a year as a touch point.
Sure.
And it's an opportunity for us to convey information too, for those people that have busy lives that don't want to go to a meeting.
So I'm wrapping up 8 months
Well, I'd
here.
like to see a start.
Yeah.
I'm wrapping up 8 months and I did a pool survey just to get a gauge of how the summer operations were and what people want to see improved. I did that on my own initiative, shared it with the PRSA. We did a survey for the UGA analysis. We did a survey for the Front Street closure plan. And an update that I'm about to give you later on is just put the final touches on the next survey for the aquatic center, and that will be published next week.
Cool.
So in 8 months, we've done 4 surveys.
Yeah.
So that's
So-
one every 2 months.
Those surveys that we've already done took extensive amount of staff time in
Right.
order to put them together to provide really useful information and responses.
You don't want just throw.
But they were also really great surveys and we got pretty good participation in town
We
too. So I
got some
think that
great
that's really helpful
participation
information to
on-
have.
On good surveys, and that's the thing, that's what you want. Nobody's
Sounds like we're
wanting to
getting
shut
better
up.
at
Well, we'll set this aside for now because we got to go into our next meeting, but I just want to close by saying, we just agreed to go forward with Mend on extending their contract for 5 years because they've got a roof that needs to be basically replaced and they've got some substantial issues down there.
The community covered.
The community covered.
Yeah.
And
Community covered,
yeah.
okay.
and so without, a year to year, they can't put money into it. They've got a grant that they can get that has to require that they get, it's from the state, Department of Agriculture will give them $40,000 to fix that roof, but they need 5-year commitment. Tom says, no problem, we can give them 5 years. We've got long-term plans, but it's not gonna happen that quickly.
Okay.
So just so that you don't get headache, you're gonna see that contract. We already told them because the it's spent out of this year's budget before, so we had to give them the go-ahead. So any headaches, you gotta let me know, but otherwise you're gonna see a contract that's gonna extend that, so.
We're replacing Christie's position. Is that correct? Is that what I heard last meeting?
Yeah, it hasn't been posted yet. But
So when we bring on the new Christie, I think that is a good time to talk about frequency of surveys, what that looks like. I think Marco has a good point. I'm not for monthly,
Job requirement.
but I do think that's a good idea.
I need to revisit that job description. That's been the holdup, is to find time to do that. Because the job description that exists for her position does not encompass everything that that position does.
Let's take a quick break. And then we'll
It's
be
hard to
back.
encompass everything that Christie did.
Can you get down here, Marco?
Oh, no.
I'm hoping the road is open, and if it is, great. I had another thing going on at 7:30 this evening.
I'll call the Leavenworth City Council meeting for March 28th to order. Please stand for the flag salute. Sharon.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Sharon Waters.
Jason Lundgren.
Ann Hesberg.
Zeke Reister.
Marco.
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 Yeah. Unmute. Are you here, Marco? No.
People laugh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Marco, are you here?
He's muted. He can't hear
I
you.
know, no, you should be able to hear us.
You fell over.
He's doing a survey.
Whoa. Whoa,
How many nails on the ceiling?
okay,
That's cool.
Sounds good.
Fun and games, fun and games.
we'll say he's here. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Debor moved. Jason seconded. All those in favor, let me see your hands. I don't see Marcos. So I guess,
Well, he's abstaining then.
I guess
Yeah.
I'm abstaining. Do we have Monica, I was told would be here
Oh.
instead of
I'm guessing she's busy.
Yeah, there's a
She
price.
might be
There's
at
no
Mary
chance to-
Canyon.
There's a major
Was it-
incident.
there was a Major incident, you think she's involved in that? I think
everybody is.
most of them, yeah, all right, we'll skip that, go down to comments from the public on items not on the agenda. Anybody, Linda? Is that your hand, you want to comment on something not on the agenda?
Yes, I would like to. I'd like to say that I was flabbergasted by the conversation during the study session on the bed and breakfasts. I've been sitting in meetings for the last 2 years, both council and planning commission meetings, and listened to the conversations around ADUs and how they were going to help add housing stock, lower cost housing because they're small units for, I guess, workforce housing. And how we have such a housing crisis, I've heard 100 times in Leavenworth. And then I hear on the other hand that, oh, it's only 7 units. Oh, it's only 9 units. Where in fact, that's 7 or 9 units for people that need housing. You keep selling to the public to go more and more dense. And you keep expecting the community to take this on, and then you just talk out of both sides of the mouth on this one. Sorry, I just can't believe. after sitting for 2 years talking about this, that all of a sudden that it's not important. Thank you.
All right, Linda, thanks. Paula?
Thank you. At today's council study session, you all talked about the possibility of creating a moratorium on bed and breakfast. This was an item brought forward by 3 council members. Your discussion really seemed to discount the concerns of these council members, and I would like to speak in support of these members' interest in setting a moratorium. You know, according to RCW 9058-590, there does not need to be an emergency set a moratorium. In fact, that RCW outlines the process for setting a moratorium and holding a public hearing to establish a 6-month moratorium. As Councilmember Waters noted, doing a density study on the number of B&Bs has been on that PC docket for a number of years, yet there has been no action taken. Interestingly enough, as soon as the moratorium was brought to the table, the PC all of a sudden decides to bring density into the discussion. This is not a coincidence. It is a response to these council members creating a sense of urgency around this topic. More than once during your discussion tonight, the words housing stock was brought up. While no, the council cannot tell homeowners how to use their ADUs, you can approve code that regulates how these ADUs are to be used, and using them to increase housing stock that is not used as a short-term rental, which is what a B&B really is key. I encourage you to keep the moratorium as a consideration. If the PC can bring you a quick recommendation around B&B densities, then the work is done. If not, a more drastic measure is needed to ensure that these council members and their constituents' concerns around bed and breakfast are honored. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Paula.
Paula.
All right.
This is Kim Tobiasen. I had a question as well. Also, in reference to B&Bs, I know under the short-term rental discussion, when that was passed, there was a lot of consideration given to how much it was going to cost to manage it and patrol it, make sure people were in compliance. So I haven't heard any discussion around how the city of Leavenworth is going to enforce the B&Bs to make sure that people actually are full-time residents. And if they're not, if they're gone half the year and they're renting, or if they're not. So again, I'd like to know where the budget is and how, if there is a complaint from a citizen, who does that complaint go to? Does it go to the city of Leavenworth? Again, there was a lot of issues around this topic on short-term rentals. And I don't think that there's going to be any difference between that and bed and breakfast if there is a complaint. So again, I would like to know the consideration, if there is a complaint, who that goes to, and how B&Bs are going to be enforced. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any others, anybody here that wants to speak to something? Yes, you want to come up and sure.
Who is it?
Actually looking for advice on how to maneuver.
Oh, okay.
Getting through, the various departments within town hall.
So,
Paul Sharp, Creek Winery.
right.
And I have been in town here myself as a resident for 16 years. And my family for over 30 under winery. It's been the latest registered winery in the state of Washington in this town. We've recently let our lease expire at the end of Front Street here. After 2 years of very difficult financial hardship due to the street closure. I'm going on record saying that I am in favor for street closure for the greater good. I do think it's the right image, what would make the town even better than it already is. I'm trying desperately to find space in town. I've come across a couple of them that have been unable to move fast enough because I can't get answers or variances that I want to request from various departments within town. I want to know if there's even a reason to fight for this, ask for exceptions, et cetera. The specific being that tasting rooms, as of a write-up, or I should say a direction on 2017, that tasting rooms be considered as a restaurant. And I understand why that would be concerned, because you are getting people consumable goods. But it was more about a bathroom issue. And as hard as it is to find space that are available, it's even harder to find a space that has something attached or a building that is attached that would fit the code. I've already tried numerous chances to do that. Found a smaller space. I don't think it's too far from the bathroom. I would love to accommodate my guests with a nice bathroom. But to put a bathroom in this space would cost me quite a bit of money out of my pocket, as I don't own the building and there's no, and my landlord has no reason to make that investment now that, you know, can rent it without upgrading it to someone who doesn't have the same requirements. I'd like to take the grandfathered benefits that I had in my previous space for almost 22 years. I'm not required a bathroom because this was a code that did not exist prior. And instead of me opening a new business, I'd like to consider that I'm moving my business because of economic hardship. And that being, closure of Front Street had changed where the places we invested our time and money for many years are unable to run business as we had in the past. And I tried a lot of different, you know, bells and whistles over the last 2 years to try and increase foot traffic, people stopping, you know, as on their walking down Front Street. So hate to ask for a special consideration or something you may not extend to everybody, but that is what I'm asking. We're a local business, we're local families, and we employ local people. And so how does one go about getting a hearing or getting the ability to present yourself to say, here's what we'd like to do. I wished I had known about it before I got into 2 other discussions with leases. And it wasn't abundantly clear. And I finally found old records, some from 2017, which I can pick it apart because my licensing by the state of Washington, which gives me the additional units for tasting rooms, is a pro-agricultural business agenda. So it's part of the business development from the state of Washington for ag. It is meant so that we can propagate tasting rooms, et cetera, and not that we can have diners or, you know, restaurant, because that's not what we were about. We're about, you know, showcasing what we want to make. Anybody got any advice on the next steps that should be taken so I can get at least a hearing that it's not going to happen, never going to happen, can happen, et cetera?
Well, I can tell you that it wouldn't be started here.
Right.
Because it's just legislative body and it's not the administration of the things. It would be, you know, meeting with our development person and, you know, Selby, if he wants to be involved in that, and having those discussions and see what's possible or not, but we're not in a position here to make that kind of judgments or.
And I'm here because I've shown up regularly, cheery face, you know, to talk, and I'll get to walk through with somebody and they'll go through and they'll have me in the hall, but I can't get a straight answer or how to go about positioning it. Then I would like to request a variance, and how do I go about doing that? And I just think if I'm someone who's here, who's vested, who's very, very vested to be here and to do business here, how difficult is it going to be for people who aren't getting this kind of feedback? And maybe I'm going about it the wrong way. Maybe I should be approaching this differently. I don't know. I'm trying to be very open about it. I visited this building 9 times in the last, you know, month, and I've had plenty of people come and look at the spaces with me, but nobody able to give you direction what to do next. If what they believe is the code, how do you address, can there be a variance to it? Or can I be grandfathered from what I had for so many years prior?
I'd be happy to meet with you anytime, and I'd be happy to loop in, you know, the community development staff and have a meeting with you. I have no idea you've been in City Hall 9 times the last month or so. I know you've had your wine.
Yes, locally, I mean, it's like, Frank, want to go and take a look at this? I think we found it.
Gotcha.
It would be, and getting access to a building that's under construction, et cetera.
Okay.
And it wasn't, it's not a complaint. It said, I'm exhausted on what I should do next.
Right.
So I do appreciate that.
What is the variance? I'm just so I can understand. I don't want to take up a lot of time here, but what is the variance that you're looking for?
That I don't have to install.
It's the bathroom requirement?
Yeah, right. Okay. And I know that there are plenty of buildings that have a single bathroom and they work for that. And they also need maybe grandfathered in as well.
Right. Yeah.
And then there are other places that do have a bathroom, but I can't get it because they do not compete with other alcohol related businesses. So it's just, the market's already tiny for any spaces. And I feel like I've got one that makes sense and I would love to continue because I've already agreed to it, hell or high water, but I can't then lump on and major build out a bathroom.
Sure. I'd be happy to meet with you at any point in time.
Sure.
Just reach out.
Right, thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else out there? Nope. Okay, we're ready to move on to resolutions, ordinances,
Mr. Mayor, can we
Oh.
recognize all the students today?
Oh, we've got students.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you're a student.
Yay. What, I'm so
Yes.
not used to
Yes.
having students.
that used to be a regular thing,
I know.
but not so much
Better
lately.
break out the pins.
Break out
I
those
know, I got it here.
Oh, yes,
Come on up
nice.
and get a pen.
They have to give a speech.
Yeah, they
Remember?
usually tell us a little bit.
No, I met with the previous administrator, Mike Sika, today, and he told me that students used to come in, they were required to as part of one of the classes.
Yeah, yeah.
But they would all lump in, this is the old city hall downtown, and they all come and they'd all wait to the last meeting of the semester. They'd all try to pile in at once. But he said the requirement was each of them had to give a 2-minute speech.
Oh. Yeah, what would you talk about?
So the
Huh?
last mayor asked, what was your project?
Yes.
This year or?
They don't have projects anymore, do you? Senior projects or, they don't do those anymore, do they?
So how come you have to show up at City
Yeah,
Hall?
what class are you taking to have to come here? Okay.
Class.
And that stands for what? Because we always forget.
Citizens of contemporary world.
Problems, basically, civics.
Yeah.
So you guys are seniors?
Yeah.
Do you have some plans you'd like to share with us? Have you headed off for school after school or?
I am leaving mid-July for the Army, actually.
Nice.
Hey,
What is that, huh? And you, any plans?
We're in Eastern.
Oh,
Nice.
okay. All right, cool. There you go. Here's the, and what are you gonna do?
I've been accepted to Western and I'm hoping to attend for their group.
Oh, cool.
which program?
Horticulture.
Horticulture program. Well, good luck to you all.
You guys want to take one? Is Quentin a student too? Is he a classmate? Do you want to take him a pin after he introduces?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, there you go. You can take them one, huh?
So have him,
What's your plan?
what's his
Quentin?
plan?
What's your plan?
My plan is to go to Oregon State University.
Oh,
Cool.
Oregon State.
Go Beavs.
A beaver. Leave it to Beaver. All right, great. Well, welcome, students. We'll have to get back into the swing of things.
Yeah.
So, all right, now resolutions, ordinances. You got number 6, wastewater collection treatment facility improvements, phase 3. Tom.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, community members, good evening. This action item before you this evening is associated with our wastewater collection and treatment facility improvement project, particularly to phase 3. Just to give a little bit of background, this overall wastewater project was funded with a $19.5 million grant loan package to the USDA Rural Development Program. Phase 1 was the overall wastewater treatment plant upgrades to remove phosphorus. Phase 2 was the South Interceptor, and then subsequently phase 3, which is comprised of 3 priorities. So we're on phase 3 now, working on priorities 1 and 2. And so this priorities 1 and 2 project is related to lining about 12,000 feet of mainline sewer with a cure-to-place pipe method. So once we finally got the design completed, which was stalled out due to administrative changes, and we had to acquire a number of easements through our city attorney's office, we're authorized to go out to bid. So we finally got the project out to bid. Unfortunately, we only received 1 bid from Allied Trenchless. And thank you for the flexibility. I did send out an email because the bid opening was on the 23rd, which was after the council packet was approved, or excuse me, published. And the reason for that is because we have pretty tight timelines with the downtown core. We did outreach last year to the chamber and the downtown businesses, and their preference was to hit this shoulder season before Memorial Day. So we actually put that in the contract. So the contractor has to has to line the downtown sewer by Memorial Day. So as I stated, we had one bid from Allied Trenchless. The engineer's estimate of this project was approximately 1.7 million, and their bid was 2.2 million, which is 30% over the engineer's estimate. And by, I would say, normal market conditions is high. Typically 10% over the engineer's estimate is enough to kind of, all right, give a little pause. However, the construction market is so volatile right now that this is not unheard of. I guess the saving grace with this project is that what's remaining of the $19.5 million grant loan package is 100% grant. So there's adequate grant funds to cover the project in addition to cover even the bid overage. So there's plenty of grant funds to make this project happen without having to supplement with sewer funds. This is a critical project. Like I said, it's 12,000 feet of mainline sewer that is in need of rehabilitation. So yeah, like I said, the staff is recommending award. Councilmember Ludwig?
Finish what you're.
I was gonna say, staff is recommending award despite paying the overage. And Councilmember Reister did reach out to me and had really good questions. And one question that he had was related to why, not a lot of interest. Well, this CIPP, again, cured in place pipe is a highly specialized method. We had 6 contractors on what's called the plan holders list. And some of them were as far out as Missouri. So the Montana, Oregon, Missouri. We reached out to a couple of those contractors, just curious why they didn't submit a bid. A lot of it was they were just too busy. One contractor said he was booked out the whole year already.
Wow.
So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So the $500,000 over engineer's estimate, is that right? Is that due, you think, partly due to the short window of implementing the project? I mean, giving them a month?
No, good question. So that is just that is just the downtown core. This is, I don't, off the top of my head, it's a 100 working day project. So it'll be an all summer.
Gotcha.
So it's just that downtown core that has that limitation. That certainly added, I'm sure, a little bit of risk to the project, especially knowing that contractors are really busy. I'm sure they bid that core.
Are they going to start in the core?
They are. They have to. We have to
start there and go right away.
Yeah, and we haven't negotiated. There's nothing to negotiate. We haven't finalized the contract, or a schedule. So as long as they adhere to the downtown core, we perhaps could be a little bit flexible when they start elsewhere. But the downtown core is critical because there's going to be disruptions for deliveries. And in terms of outreach, I placed one of these at your station where your seats are. So Andy Zomtech Baxter and I went and hand delivered these to the downtown businesses. So there's a QR code that'll take you to the project website. And we explain to them that there will be disruptions primarily related to deliveries. Worst case scenario, there could be restrictions to discharging sewer, but we are hopeful that there will be no restrictions. It's on the contractor to manage site sewer services.
Are they going to work Fridays?
No, I
in
believe
the past we've said no in the core.
Correct. No, the downtown core is restricted to midweek. Yeah, that's a good point.
And are they bursting the pipe?
No, it's just lining.
Just lining.
Yeah, so it's trenchless. It should be non-invasive. I mean, obviously
It
there's.
rolls out.
Correct.
To
Yeah. And they place, they put compressed air in, it pushes the liner up against the hardening cures.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And who's the company? Where are they
Allied Trenchless.
from?
They're based out of Cashmere, I believe. They're a local contractor.
Okay.
It says Wenatchee.
Wenatchee.
Yeah.
So Wenatchee based.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're based in Wenatchee.
Other questions? I would entertain a motion.
The Leavenworth City Council moves to accept the construction bid and authorize the mayor to execute a contract contingent upon USDA rural development approval with Allied Plumbing and Pumps LLC, known as Allied Trenchless, for the wastewater collection and treatment facility improvements project Phase 3 collection system in the amount of $2,167,884.25.
Second.
Moved by Ann, seconded by Sharon. Any other questions? All those in favor, let me see your hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you, council members.
Yep. And it's just marked that we lost.
Marco.
Marco has left.
Okay, action 7, approve the purchase of a new parking department vehicle. Selby?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I apologize for not bringing this to you a month or so ago when you approved the purchase of 2 vehicles, pickup trucks for the water department and the parks department, because we need one for the parking department as well, and we had budgeted for it. So before you is the exact same vehicle that you approved for the water department and parks department a month ago. We are bringing this to you because we had $40,000 in the budget, and the actual purchase price through the state contract is $43,193.60, and is for a Nissan Frontier. We do need a pickup truck for the parking because of cones, barriers, meters, kiosks, etc. Those ladies do a lot of hauling stuff around, and they're quite good at it.
And meters.
A lot of those, a lot of those.
Okay.
I would entertain a motion.
Leavenworth City Council moves to approve the purchase of a 2023 Nissan Frontier in the amount of $43,193.60 for the parking department.
Second.
Moved by Ann, seconded by Zeke. Any other questions?
I'll say it again, I'd like to see us move to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
We have the cheapest power in the country. We've got the infrastructure.
They can park right here in the parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the electric, there's limited EVs available through the state process, but I don't care. I think we really should make that a priority. We've been buying a lot of vehicles lately. So there's no time like the present to start adding to our fleet.
Noted.
Would we need to put in more
Maybe.
of those stations?
Maybe,
Yeah.
but that's just catching up with the future.
Yeah.
You know, catching up with the present, not the future.
This fights it.
Yeah.
But you'll still approve this one.
Yeah, I will.
You will, but
This time, but I'm serious, like.
I agree.
I see a lot of new electric vehicles on the road.
We have, if you want to amend this, we have enough money in parking to buy a nice Rivian.
I think that would be a little extravagant for parking folks.
I do know that there is a Chevy Silverado. They're not available right now, but they're about 80,000.
Yeah.
About what?
80,000.
Oh.
The Lightnings are less.
And the Ford is, yeah.
Although they do have a higher price point, they also have a lower fuel point.
True.
So,
And maintenance,
And maintenance.
yeah, so it would at least be worth,
yeah,
cross
Yep.
comparison of.
seriously.
If you could get them now, you
Yeah.
can't right now,
Right.
but but it is true. And I know, I mean, East Wenatchee just got a police vehicle or,
Did.
yeah,
Yeah, it was a partnership with PEC.
yeah. To try the electric there, so.
But we'll take that to heart, and as we are looking at our ER&R.
Let's plan that for the next round of vehicles. Just build it in, order them way ahead of time if we have to.
All right. Any other questions on this one though? All those in favor, let me see your hand. All right. It is approved unanimously. Reports. Anybody have a report on things they've gone to?
Of course I
You do.
Just quickly. On March 15th, I attended an evening Zoom meeting regarding the creative district that John Sutherland came and talked to us about. And there was another lady there that had even more information. I just want to keep track of all that. I attended the Chelan South Department Board meeting. Dr. Wallace, who has been the interim Chelan South District Health Officer, was voted and accepted the position of the Chelan South District Health Officer. So he's no longer interim. He said there will be a rollback of COVID vaccines nationwide due to cases going down. However, Okanagan is seeing an increase. They're having over 100 cases in 100,000. Schools built before 2016 and earlier will be undergoing a lead surveillance and is being tested for lead in the water. And I don't know if that's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to Kashmir.
Which was a knee-jerk to Flint is actually what started all that.
Well, the knee-jerking is good as long as it gets done. lead is greater on this side of the mountains because of the type of paint that was used in the 1950s and 70s that a lot of people are living in those houses. And the current Omicron variants, XBB.1.5, predominance is in people over 65. And on March 20th, I attended the mosquito board meeting. Jenny Mullins, as the program manager, she reported that since there's still plenty of snow in our district, this may be one of those years when she doesn't begin larviciding until April. The Stevens Pass Snowtell it registers 35.4 inches of snow water equivalent, and last year was 37.1. Fish Lake Snowtell, just south of Jack Creek and Icicle River watershed, has 23.5 inches of snow water. Last year it was 27.2, and Trinity, Washington Snowtell has 27.1. Last year it was 29.8 inches of snow water. So overall, we have less snow currently than last year. The La Nina conditions, which lead to greater snowfall in our area, have been declared over. And she's going to start making arrangements in case we need drone treatment for the mosquitoes, especially out on Prowl Road. And on March 22nd, I attended the DBR, the Design Review Board meeting, and it was the loft is wanting to do some stuff with the building that they're in. And since that is like the old Idlewife building, and it was here, the first building that was built, they are going to meet again in the next DBR meeting and sort out some things. And the chamber dinner at the NZN, which we attended, some of us sitting here together, that was just awesome. Wasn't that great? They had the best program I've seen ever, and I go to those once a year. And Diane Norman, Matt Cade, and Ann Peavy received differently titled, but they were volunteer trophies. And so I thought that was just great, that the recognition that was happening is so important.
Dave Severance too.
Yes, and Dave Severance, excuse me. And March 23rd and 28th, I attended the special city council executive sessions, the downtown steering committee this morning, and Selby is the chairperson there. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you. Jason, do you have any?
Big shoes to fill. I feel like a slacker again. I attended one of the two special city council meetings. And then I attended housing today with Zeke, but he's the chair for now. So I'm going to punt that down to Zeke.
All right. And
I have some link transit updates. Service is going to be changing just a little bit. Route 22, the shuttle that has been going from the park and ride through town and back is no longer going to be running. They're going to be running the big bus from the park and ride through town on the highway, and then it's going to loop up Ski Hill Drive and along Evans Street as their turnaround, because they can no longer use their turnaround at the gas station at the west end of town. So that's going to be their route until the roundabout gets constructed, which is happening this summer. It'll start about in May this year. So we've got a lot of construction that's going to be happening in Leavenworth this year. Lake Transit approved the agreement between the city and Lake Transit for putting in that main line when the roundabout is constructed. So the back end of that was also approved, because we had already approved our front end part of that at a council meeting before, and it just needed to be tied with a nice bow with Lake Transit. So at our last board meeting, Lake Transit Board also approved that agreement. So that will move forward as a joint venture between the city and Lake Transit. Last week, we had a workshop specifically discussing taxation associated with public transit. And several years ago, through a ballot measure, Chelan and Douglas counties approved a 0.2% increase, and Lake Transit split it off into individual 0.1% increases in taxation for public transit funding. And they took that first 0.1%, but over the course of the last couple of years have deferred taking that second 0.1%. A lot of that had to do with COVID, and a lot of federal and state funding that came in for public transit. And so that funding hasn't necessarily been needed. But we're coming to the point where we are going to need to take that. And if we continue to defer it, it's possible that Link Transit will no longer qualify for any grant funding from the state, which would be hugely problematic. So we had a workshop to discuss it. There weren't any decisions made at this time because we need some more legal guidance as a board in order to make a good decision with regard to either right now we have it deferred until January 1st, 2024. And that's when that second 0.1% will become a part of our taxation in Chelan and Douglas counties. And there's potentially an option for us to continue to defer that, but the legal conversation needs to continue to happen as to whether or not that will put us in a standing where we no longer qualify for grants. And if that's the case, then that would be really problematic for the finances for Link Transit. So we're waiting on some more legal information on that. So that's what our workshop last week was about. I think that's all I got.
Okay. I attended the executive session on Friday. And then this morning I attended the downtown steering committee with Sharon. And Selby was his chair. I'll let him basically cover that stuff. We had pretty widespread discussion on priorities and where to start our recommendations from MX and M. But I'll let Selby handle that. And for the housing committee, we now have a sort of a game plan to hand over to the city council to approve. So instead of reading all of this, I'll just hit some highlights. We are basically the focus of this advisory committee is workforce housing and ideas of what we're trying to do for workforce housing is how to spend city funds devoted by the council to housing, options for funding for land purchase and for construction of housing. So purchasing land, housing development projects, which are requesting city funds, and options for infrastructure improvements, which promote housing options. And we're also proposing a 9-member advisory committee, residents, business owner, a developer, a nonprofit organization, and a minority representative. So we'll be seeing this on our agendas here sometime soon, and that's where we're going to start. And that's my report.
Great.
Can I ask you a question, Zeke?
Yeah.
On the city funds, is that the 600,000?
No, that's
because
Well,
yeah, because that's going to go
200 a
to
year.
them, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but so you meant the next 200?
next 200,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, thanks.
And all the money that I'm going to get you.
Over Olympia?
Over from Olympia.
Ooh, sounds good. But when it's in my hand, I know.
I know.
Actually, when it's in my.
Hand it over.
Tibor,
I got one of them living in my house too.
Tibor,
I did the 2 executive sessions Thursday and yesterday. And other than that,
hey, nothing to report. So just briefly, being facetious, but there are a couple of bills that are still active that would potentially add some funding for us. One is an additional REIT tax that would be something that the council could choose to option. It hasn't cleared all the hurdles yet, but it's still alive, as they say. And that would allow us to do a 0.25% for affordable housing, an additional REIT, local REIT. So that's still in play. And the other one that's still in play is actually on our favorite topic of short-term rentals. Now, it's not a lodging tax on all hotel motels, but there is still a bill alive that would just target short-term rentals as those that are taking a lot of housing units out. And actually, that one is a 10% excise tax on. So we don't have a lot of those within the city, but it's still one that would potentially, again, bring us some if it goes through. It's still alive. It's passed out of the Senate. It's passed out of two committees in the House. It's going to the Finance Committee next. And if it gets passed on from there, it will get a full vote in the House. So it's still in play. So those are the two that could still give us some potential funding.
Would that just be for STRs in our commercial districts, or would that also apply to B and Bs?
You know, I don't know that if it's clear, if it's, because it is the overnight rental of homes, but I haven't read the particulars as to if they're going to exclude the B and B. I know they do allow for that jurisdictions can opt some of them out. And I think it's, if that's, they can opt out, for instance, one per person, because there's many that are owned by, many people have multiple. So that if you're just looking at a single, so there are some nuances there that I don't know fully what that would be. But that's, and I don't know that, it would be, again, one that would be require, passage from the council. So it's potential that if the county wanted to do it, they could also do it, but I don't know if they have the appetite to do that or not, but they could generate a lot more than we would. Anyway, but that's where we're at with housing. So I was only half facetious that we could get a little, not my big bucks yet, but we're still going to work on it.
Carl, how's that 10% excise tax? Is that 10% of that bill for that STR?
That bill, that would be an additional 10% added on to their charges for an overnight.
Okay.
Oh,
Good chunk.
Are there any conversations at the legislature level about second homes or vacancy homes?
Yeah, that one is
Tourist
still, that's still the one that everybody feels like that would be a property tax that would get challenged and.
Right.
But, they also thought that the excise tax on capital gains would get thrown out too, and it didn't. So maybe if it got challenged, it would survive, but I don't know.
It's actually supposed to be in the Constitution that you can't tax two houses.
You can't, you have to tax all property by the same value, by their value.
Okay, that's what it is.
But that's why we're saying a second home, you couldn't do a property tax, but you could do a fee for it being empty.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be based on value, it'd be based on that
use,
but it would get challenged as property
value wise.
Right.
You'd have to define empty.
Well, it's already been defined by some, if it's not fully occupied by a single family or relatives of that family, whatever, for 6 months of the year, then it's considered empty. Vacant or whatever. But anyway, we'll see.
Okay.
That's my report.
All right. Me next.
You're next.
All right. So our new HR consultant, Cabot Down Associates, whose contract the city council approved at the last meeting, has been onboarded. And our principal contact, Mary Reisner, will be on site this Thursday to review our existing HR practices, policies, procedures, and to meet staff. I had coffee with Mike Warden from the Rotary last week to discuss several things, golf course included. But his focus was really on the upcoming Rotary conference that begins May 19th, which is the date of your retreat, immediately following the retreat. And Mike is encouraging someone from the city council to attend that conference. So.
Sharing 3 days?
What's that?
Is it 3 days?
It's Friday from 3 p.m. all day Saturday and all day Sunday. There's the Leavenworth Fondo bike ride taking place. I'm doing that on Sunday, so I won't be able to attend the entire conference. So I've already registered for that. But we would like to see some city representation, so I'm encouraging you all to consider attending.
Did you leave you the website by chance?
Um,
We could
I
register.
think it's Reimagine Rotary, if I remember,
I
right.
remember that he gave it to us, but
Yeah,
I don't think their registration is inexpensive, and that might be a bit of a deterrent.
I think it's $200 to $300.
oh, really?
It's over $300.
So 300 now?
Yeah.
That's a bit.
I did mention this again, but it bears repeating. The PRSA's survey on the indoor aquatic / recreation center next door is complete. We've put the final touches on it with the consultant today, and that will be going live next week, just rolling out the communication plan for that.
It's been translated.
It's been translated. The consultant used SurveyMonkey to initiate the translation, then Emerson Peak.
Not SurveyMonkey.
Proofread it.
No,
No, SurveyMonkey did the original translation.
no kidding.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
and then Emerson proofed it.
Yeah.
Correct, made a lot of corrections. So point being, don't rely entirely on SurveyMonkey to do
I
your
wouldn't,
translation.
no, none of those online. That's great, though.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing that go out.
The project tracker section of the website is about to be launched. You guys all have a QR code that'll bring you to a project on there. Right now, there are 3 projects that are on that page. I'm waiting for the final touches on the Aquatic Center project to be finalized for launching that to the public, and there'll be 4 projects up there on that project tracker when we make it live. We'll be adding them. We have several projects that we still need to create pages for, but pretty excited about that. It's taken a long time for that to come to fruition, but I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a great tool for keeping the community involved and informed about what's going on in the city. This is a fun update. This, I think it was last Friday. Kudos to the parks folks for helping the parking folks, but the parking meters on Front Street, which has now been indefinitely closed to cars, have been removed, all except for 2 stubborn ones. Amazing encouragement.
Yeah. Sounds like fun. Boy, can we volunteer?
It could be a city event.
Can we volunteer?
All right.
You got a new
We can do it.
The DRB met this morning. I don't have the agenda in front of me or my notes from it, but a lot of discussion around the Front Street closure plan, and direction was received from the committee for staff to begin the investigation of installing retractable pneumatic bollards to replace the removable bollards that we have and we put in place for events, but also to replace some of the ugly orange barricades that we have.
Oh, you don't like the orange?
No, I don't, never have.
Tacky.
So that discussion was had today, and I think our parking staff is the one who was really excited about this. And so Shannon's going to be taking the lead on this project.
Awesome.
People
Those
want
are my-
to see them.
my updates.
So it's
People
pretty
drive by.
good support in that conversation.
Very strong support, very strong.
So has there been talk about any sort of potential timeline on that yet?
No, wait, no.
When do we get rid of the orange barricades?
We gotta make sure they work in our climate, like some other facilities we purchased. And
No one cares.
I'm not gonna make promises.
No.
As quickly as we can. How's that?
Do we have any actual working bollards at all? Pneumatic ones?
Not
Not
pneumatic,
pneumatic
not here in town.
Just
We
manual,
have-
whatever.
We have removable bollards, so you'll see them go up during big festivals. But Public Works crew puts those up and takes them down. And especially we experienced this Christmas time, having to take them out in order to get plows down Front Street and then put them back up. And so having ones that you can just flip a switch and they just come down and then you can drive over and then put them back up. Oh, it's gonna be awesome.
Mhm. It'll also be better for emergency services.
Yeah,
Yes, right. Yep.
that's my updates.
Right. Chantel.
Council, your finance report is in your packet. Does anyone have any questions?
I got halfway through.
I have a comment.
Sure.
Let me get to the page.
I got a few comments, but
It's an excited comment. I'm pretty sure you know what I'm gonna comment on. Hold on, let me get to the sheet.
does it have to do with December?
It does have to do with December.
The
Yes.
record of all records.
Yes, it was our hotel motel tax, breaking records and going over $500,000
For 1 month.
for 1 month, $552,000. And the previous record was $473,000. So
Blew it out of the water.
yeah,
Yep.
this last December was big for us.
Yeah.
And that's very impressive.
Well, I'll add to that. January is going to be a record as well. Not nearly as spectacular because we are talking about January. So, but yeah, hotel motel will be 352,000 compared to 246.
Yeah,
So
that's
January
still a
is
big new record.
number. Although
Yeah.
we do have to remember 22 is January, snow apocalypse,
True.
right? So we lost a lot of potential
But in previous
22.
years, we also haven't seen something like that
Sure.
either. So,
Sure.
yeah.
So that's looking good. Retail, not nearly as significant on the uptick, but it is definitely still remaining to be an uptick. The surprising one that I'm seeing, and I'm sorry, Mayor, if this takes any wind out of the sails there, but REIT, we received 0
Really?
for the month of March, which would have been February sales. And I'm expecting 2,500 in April for March.
Yeah, the market's been really down.
So that is definitely a sign that sales
Sales
have
are down.
slowed way down. In general, with the finance department, this is annual report season. So we have completed several. The lodging tax annual report. Today, I wrapped up a majority of the WashDOT annual non-discrimination report that Tom and Andy will be assisting me on finalizing for submission. And I want to give kudos out to Brandy Minette. She is our part-time deputy clerk for accounts payables and PRSA. She completed the PRSA's annual report with very little guidance from me, and she did it all on her own.
Secretary of State annual report?
It goes to the state auditor's office. Okay, and then the city's annual report is, of course, the big kahuna, which I am working on side by side with implementing the ClearGov budget process. But I do have both underway. They will take me a few months to complete. The city's annual report is due by May 30th. And just want to give you a heads up, we did get reached out by the union Teamsters for a random compliance audit. We've submitted all of their requests for information, and so far so good. They've come back, they've asked a couple more clarifying questions, we've provided the answers, but it's looking like it's going to be a clean audit from their perspective.
Okay. You. Tom.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, good evening, council. I have 3 updates for you. The first one, I just want to give a shout out to Don Shans, our Parks Division Supervisor, for taking the initiative to close the 1100 block of Front Street yesterday to protect the public from a private contractor tree removal operation that had the potential to go very, very wrong. In addition, shout out to Rick to supplementing his staff resources as well. We had Front Street closed for about 3.5 hours due to safety concerns. Fortunately, the tree came down without incident. And again, that was a private operation, not a city operation. Second update, I know it's super exciting to see that our hotel motel tax is up and our visitors up. I need to talk wastewater with the council. At the next meeting, not to surprise you, you will see a $45,000 task order with Gray and Osborne to do a capacity analysis at our wastewater plant. Since the end of 2022, I was able to run BOD. So BODs, biochemical oxygen demand, that's basically the solids that go to the wastewater plant. We only have so much capacity to treat solids. Since COVID, our BOD loading is on the uptick. So we want to make sure we get ahead of, pending development. We're not at to the point where Department of Ecology forces us to do planning. Typically when that happens, it's too late. So we want to get ahead of it. So our last capacity analysis was based on pre-phosphorus removal upgrades at the plant. So our wastewater plant has been modified to remove phosphorus through a biological process. And we actually took an existing selector tank out of service to accommodate that. So we don't have a true understanding what our wastewater capacity is or plant. It's not like to be clear, we're not violating permit requirements or anything, but we just want to be proactive. We don't want to get to the point where like, hey, we're not meeting discharge permits, you know, what do we do now? So that's why you're gonna see a $45,000 task order at the next city council meeting. Again, the BOD loading, it's just trending upward at a rate that's higher than what was anticipated. Third update. So the last update this evening is on the Ski Hill Drive sidewalk project. As the council is aware, the Ski Hill sidewalk project will complete sidewalk gaps along Ski Hill Drive from US 2 to Evans Street. The primary update this evening is regarding street parking, in particular, the impact of street parking. So for example, in order to meet design standards related to site distance with the curb ramps, the project area from US 2 to Evans Street, again, if we meet design standards, which I recommend that we do, we would be able to pre-existing accommodate 41 parked vehicles to 8. So it would reduce street parking. At this point, it makes sense to eliminate the 8 remaining parking areas for the following reasons. One, Ski Hill Drive is classified as an urban collector. Per city's adopted design standards, urban collectors are not designed for street parking. 2, additionally, we have sufficient roadway width to continue bike lanes in both directions all the way to US 2. Another pro of eliminating the parking, and instead of if we add bike lanes, it will tie into the bike lanes that WashDOT is going to be adding on US 2. And thirdly, the city's adopted complete streets policy encourages development of safe and comfortable transportation rights of way for motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users throughout the city. So moving forward, let me preface this also by saying the reason why we're moving quickly is because we want to get in, make sure we're still in a competitive bid environment for the Ski Hill Sidewalks project. We anticipate to go out to ad in 2 weeks. And the reason why this is coming may seem abrupt is that the consultant working on the project notified us of the site distance restraints last week. So we want to get ahead of it. We're going to send intentional letters to everyone on the project corridor explaining why, what we're doing. But I just want to inform the council that we want to formalize the bike lanes on both sides of this project area, just again, due to the fact that we're going to be losing 41 stalls, going from 41 to 8. And in addition, the glacier lot will be improved. That construction project will occur this year. And so next year there'll be additional formalized parking in town. So. Councilmember.
Tom, do you have any sense if those are residents using that parking or visitors?
Good question. So Andy conducted door-to-door outreach for everyone along the project corridor. And keep in mind, this is pure anecdotal input at this point, but she noticed that it was very few residents that were actually parked in the street, but we want to make sure we will reach out intentionally to everyone and let them know. Our number one fear is if we would do this and not let anyone know and have folks the opportunity to weigh in prior to. But it's a push. We're sending out letters right away this week because we don't want to miss a prime bid opportunity.
Does that grant have an expiration date in 2023 or?
It doesn't, but if we delay, I expect the construction costs to go up. Because if we delay and get into the start of the busy season of construction, contractors they're just going to raise their prices accordingly to try to meet our schedule.
Or delay until next year if there's hiccups.
That would be exactly. Because at some point the TIB, they won't let us go out to ad if it's like say June.
Yeah.
They'd be like, no, you're not going to get a good price. So Councilmember Hesper.
So by adding the sidewalk on Ski Hill Drive, how is that impacting site distance? Or do these parking stalls not meet site distance requirements to begin with?
No, that's a great question. So it's the curb ramps. So the crossings along the corridor that we're going to be installing in order to meet those site distance requirements. So in other words, if a car is driving down the street, you want to be able to see if there's pedestrian waiting at the curb ramp. So that's
right. Okay.
The design criteria we're wanting to meet.
Okay.
There's enough of those that it takes from both sides and you get another one right down. And so pretty soon you're eating them up.
2 quick questions are some of those parking spots along the side of the Nazarene Church.
They are.
Okay, because a lot of funerals and things that occur there.
Right.
A lot of people.
Yeah. And that's one of our primary, we're going to intentionally target everyone in the corridor.
Okay.
We want to let them know and give them an opportunity to ask questions.
Do you have a little spiel on the sinkhole?
Oh, I do. Yeah, that was a water leak. So the water, there was at West Center and Ski Hill Drive, there was what appeared to be a small sinkhole. On investigation, the crew had to extensively hydro excavate across the entire lane to patch a 6-inch steel water main. Excuse me, cast iron. It was cast iron. Fixed, yeah. The patch is in cold mix right now, but once the asphalt plants open up, we'll patch it properly.
I've noticed you guys have been patching potholes around the neighborhood too. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
oh yeah, you're welcome.
My suspension appreciates it.
I know, it is pothole season.
Potholes time is right, and on the. So how long is it gonna take when they redo our nice paved street on Wasdot, that do that? How long before they start getting potholes again?
Oh, on US two?
Yeah, on US two.
I can't remember what the DOT, highway like that, I believe that they try to resurface like once every 10 years to avoid potholes.
There's quite a few of them between
Yeah.
going down. So I was just curious.
Yeah, well, I know that their preservation budget has been light the last
Right.
couple of years, several years probably, but.
I would hope that that when we get it all completely redone, that it'll last a little longer. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are then at the end of our meeting.
Mayor, would you
Oh.
like me to give an update?
Oh, you're still there?
I'm still here. I'm keeping my camera off because I have bad connection.
Okay, Lilith, I'm sorry.
No worries. Community development is humming along and we were really excited last week to have Amy McCoy start as our permit tech. She's hit the ground running quite well and we are refining some of our permit intake processes to make that smoother. And it's going to work out really well, I think, here in the long run. So we're excited about all of that. Just today, we did receive the first handful of building permits for the Leavenworth Meadows apartments. So those will be showing up on the permit track system as we organize them and get them to a complete status and ready to be reviewed and discussed. So in any case, those are moving along as well. I do want to point out to the gentleman who had the question about moving his winery and changing in building codes. There are various ways of appealing decisions, and I would start with a pre-application meeting. So at least we have the whole team look at the site and review what's needed there. So I'll look forward to having those conversations. If you want to come into the office on Thursday morning, I will be there and available, as Frank should be as well too, if he's not out on an inspection. So happy to have some more of those discussions at that time. Otherwise, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that we had identified several short-term rentals that were not fully permitted. We are talking through those. We are talking with Sean Lynn, who I see is still with us right now. So hello, Sean. We'll be meeting with him on Friday and we'll be talking to the other property owners individually in the coming weeks about how to rectify short-term rental issues and moving those forward. And Kim, I will respond to your question tomorrow as well. So any case, I'm glad to be working more and happy to be back in City Hall more as well. So if questions come up, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Lilith. I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Jason, seconded by Sharon. All those in favor, let me see your hands. Anybody opposed? You better.
Serious?
You're gonna stay by your side.
Can't hold me through. You're adjourned. Fun.
Oh,
right.
Oh, do I?
I'm hanging out out there.
We did that thing, right?
For 6
You finally got a hold of him.
He had it in his hand. Yeah, I canceled on him a week or so ago when I was. I need a motion to adjourn because I'm town.
We used to actually have votes where everyone in was not.
Screw you.
working.
You need a second.
Yeah, it's in the mirror.